Today we're going to look at problem solving and some ideas about how we may go about making decisions. So today's learning objectives, or rather learning objectives of this presentation, are to define what is problem solving, explain the importance of getting it right, and then looking at a couple of models that you may be able to apply that may help you with problem solving and allowing you to explore different options and making the correct decisions, and going to look at an activity that might allow you to think about how you would apply this in practice. So first off, what is problem solving? It is the ability to get answers to questions through a conscious, organised process. So it usually involves critical thinking, making sure you understand what the causes of the problem are properly, so you can then go around to resolve them. And it is important because it allows you to look at problems systematically. It allows you to increase productivity, improve the quality of the results that are achieved, generate more and better ideas. You will also generate some pretty stupid ideas, but you need to generate all the ideas so that you can come up with the better ideas, the more creative ways of looking at things and more creative solutions. It should help to reduce conflict if the various people involved in a problem are involved in trying to solve the problem. And it allows you to adapt in a changing environment because you're looking at the different angles of the problem and allowing you to move forward. So there are steps that we can apply when we're solving problem, and we're going to be looking at those in a little bit more detail. So the steps approach is a traditional method, and it's fairly straightforward and fairly easy to use. It includes defining the problem clearly, breaking down the seemingly enormous and unmanageable problems into smaller parts. And you might do this with projects and big tasks as well, that you break them down into smaller chunks so that they're easier to manage and easier to deal with. So if you're doing that with problems, it allows you to resolve the problem much more easily as well. And then you need to approach the problem one step at a time. So if you're breaking it down into its component parts effectively, then you can deal with it bit by bit, which makes it easier to solve the problem. So the 7 steps that we're going to look at are to identify and clearly define the problem as precisely as possible. And we'll look at all of these in a bit more detail in a moment or two. So once you've done that, you want to brainstorm the different solutions that you can come up with. You then want to look at each of the solutions that you've identified and assess each of them individually. How effective are they? How practical is this? So you're looking at it and thinking, yes, it's a really interesting idea, but is it actually something that's going to work? Is it something that's going to work within the time scale that we need, for example? You then would decide which of your solutions is going to be the correct one given the circumstances that you're looking at. And then you'd need to put together a plan in terms of how you're going to resolve it, what you're going to do. So you make up a plan, and then you carry out the plan, and then the final final step would be to review the outcome, have a look at it, what worked, what didn't work. Has it resolved the problem? Okay, so has it resolved the problem? If not, you may need to repeat the steps again to figure out what you're going to do in addition to help resolve the problem. And it may be, as you'll see with some of the examples we're going to look at, that it may not just be that you've got one solution. There may be a couple of ideas, a couple of solutions that you're going to run together. So it's not necessarily that you're going to come up with one single solution, but you're going to look at the situation and analyse the various different solutions, decide which one or ones are the best for you, and then apply them. Okay, so that's our 7 steps of problem solving. And as I said at the beginning in the previous slide, It is a fairly straightforward process, so hopefully that would work for you. Now we're going to look at how we might apply that in a little bit more detail. So we have a problem with James, or rather James has a problem. It's a 20-year-old student who is currently feeling stressed, and I'm sure many of you can relate to that. He's been falling behind with his studies for some time, and he has a deadline for an important piece of work, but he knows he's not going to meet that. So this is his problem. He's under pressure, he's feeling stressed, he's got a deadline that he knows he's not going to meet, the work's just not going to be completed on time. So we're going to go through the various steps and think about how James might resolve his problem. So first thing he has to do is to identify and define the problem and to be as precise and specific as possible. So the problem is that he's not being able to hit the deadline for his coursework. Okay, so nice and clear, can't meet the deadline. Step 2, come up with possible solutions. The more solutions that are generated, you're more likely to get a good one that you can explore. And you want to come up with all sorts of different ideas. As it says here, even the ridiculous ideas should be included, because you need to come up with all the different ideas, because you're more likely to then think, well, actually, that's not a good idea, but I've thought of something else as well. So get them all out there, get them all down on paper, so you've got your range of choices. So whether there's something that is really a great idea or something that is ridiculous, you want to come up with all of these different ideas and you want to log them. So what might we come up with? So ignore the problem completely, it might go away. Copy someone else's work. Hand in the bit of coursework that he has done on time but unfinished, so submit what he's done so far. Speak to the lecturer to see if he can get an extension. Discuss the problem with his class tutor. Issues could include a lack of interest in the subject, problems with time management, anxiety. So even just being anxious could make things worse. That it's really difficult to then get started because he's getting so stressed about the work. Procrastination, lack of motivation, and I'm sure there's lots of other things that we could come up with as well. So here we're looking at different things that may impact on his ability to work to deadlines or to complete the task. And the final option we have here is to speak to a student counsellor to explore the causes of the problem. So, what might be, could it be something that's actually not within the course itself? Could it be something that's happening at home? If it's something like anxiety or lack of motivation, procrastination, the possibility is that a student counsellor or an academic advisor, for example, might be able to give some guidance about how to deal with this. And a counsellor might also help come up with coping mechanisms and come up with some strategies that he hasn't thought about. So step 3, assess how effective and practical each potential solution is. So as it says, think about the advantages and disadvantages of all of the options that you come up with in step 2. So here we have a little table that takes us through them. Ignore the problem. Well, it's easy because you're just not facing it, but the disadvantage is that he'll fail the course. Copy the work. Easier in the short term, but plagiarism and ethically wrong. Adding to that is probably, it will vary from centre to centre, but if you're caught plagiarising, you could fail the unit, you could fail your assessment, you could be thrown off the course. So again, it's got a lot of disadvantages attached to that one. Unfinished work, at least he would have tried, but he'd get a poor mark or he'd fail, but at least he's submitting something. Get an extension, good short-term answer. Potentially, if he's got more time and perhaps deals with some of the other issues, he could then pass. But the disadvantage is the embarrassment of asking. Final option was to speak to it wasn't final one, was it? Another option, speak to the class tutor, help getting started. Sometimes that's a major problem, is actually just how to get started. So the tutor might be able to help him to get started. Again, the disadvantage is the embarrassment of needing to ask for help. Final option was to speak to the student counsellor. The advantage is it may take longer to get to the bottom of his feelings. It may help him come up with some strategies to cope long term. So it may help him in the long term in terms of doing the coursework more generally. The disadvantages are it's embarrassing. He may not know who to contact or how to go about making that contact. Another disadvantage may be the time involved. So it's a good solution, and probably will be the best solution long term, but it does have some disadvantages attached to it as well. So step 4, you've gone through each of your solutions, you've identified the advantages and disadvantages, and now the option is to really think about what is the best solution or the solutions that are going to help James resolve his problem. So he should arrange an extension and talk to a student counsellor. I wonder if they're the solutions that you thought of as well. Seems a reasonable solution. It deals with the short-term problem of the deadline, and it deals with the longer-term issues that he may be feeling. And as I said, if he's suffering anxiety or depression or not coping with the course, then what we're seeing is a symptom of one assignment, but long term this is something that's going to impact on all of his assessments. So talking to the lecturer directly, dealing with the particular assessment he's working on is important, but to help him long term, talking to the student counsellor is probably also a good idea. Step 5, what does he need to do to actually make that happen? So he needs to speak to his lecturer at the end of the next class. He could phone the student counselling service, the phone numbers on the college website, or again, if he's speaking to his lecturer, the lecturer might be able to give him contact details as well. But a lot of the information we can get nowadays through electronic means. And again, these are James's options, but I realise that these are situations that face students all the time. And if you don't want to talk to your lecturer in class, you could send an email, you could telephone. But as he says as well, if James is nervous, he could plan out what he's going to say in advance, so he can think out what he's going to say, so he's got a better idea of how to ask for help as well. So we're saying he should speak to them, but if he thinks he may not actually speak to them, or as it says here, he may chicken out, maybe he can ask a friend to go with him to give him some moral support. Step 7 was to review the outcome. So, depending on how he got on, hopefully it went smoothly, hopefully his lecturer was helpful and allowed him an extension that was going to work for him, and the counselling service, as I say, is probably more of an ongoing thing, but the counselling service may be able to help and give him some coping strategies as well. But by reviewing what's happened, you're able to look over what worked, what didn't work, how you can learn from the experience. So sometimes, the idea of being embarrassed and being nervous about speaking to someone when it's not something you've done before, you may worry about how they're going to react. So, thinking about, well, actually, they didn't react the way I thought they would. I did get an extension, they didn't just say no. Hopefully he's learned from that and he's able to improve his future interactions, or the next time he's got to try and solve a problem, he may have more confidence as well. So, just thinking about how the problem solving techniques have worked as well is really important. So this review is a really important step. So the next one we're going to look at now is called Starbursting. And it's really more useful when you're trying to solve a problem, but you can't brainstorm. You're just struggling to come up with ideas. You're struggling to come up with solutions. So this is a way of trying to unblock your mind to help get some ideas flowing to give you the generation of solutions for you. So we look at things in a different way and we ask questions rather than coming up with solutions. So and this technique is called Starbursting, and here's what it looks like. So you put a star in the middle, a 6-point star, and basically in each point of the star you're going to write down question words: who, what, where, when, how, and why. Okay, so you're writing each of those, and then you're really just asking yourself questions round about each of those different question words. So for example, we're going to look at it again. So this is about, I think I said in a previous slide, it's a charity event or something like that. Starburst chart diagram for a new product. So we're looking at introducing organise a charity silent auction. Okay, so you're going to organise a charity auction. So your questions are: who will do what? So what tasks are required? Who's going to do them? Who else do we need to talk to? What tasks need to be undertaken? What resources do we require? Why are we doing the tasks this way? And any other why questions you can think of. Where will the event take place? Where will we advertise? When are we going to work on the goals? When will the event be held? How will we get prizes to the winners? How will we manage the money? Where are the prizes coming from, perhaps, as well? So as you start asking these questions, you might identify additional questions that you want to ask. Okay, so really it's just you look at what it is you're trying to do, and if you can't actually come up with brainstorming ideas of solutions, then this is an alternative way of approaching that, so that you're just answering your 5W questions and the how. So as I said, it allows you to look at a problem from a different viewpoint. And an extension of this concept is DeBono's 6 thinking hats, which we're going to look at now. At the end of this, I'm going to give you an activity that I want you to work on for you to think about. And for my class, I'll be getting my class to do this in class time. So this is a problem solving technique, and it allows you to use 6 different approaches to solve your problem. Encourages you to separate fact from opinion. So you're trying to work with facts rather than opinions and emotions and things like that. And it helps you to look fully at the negative and the positive opinions. So again, as we were doing with our 7-step model, you're looking at the advantages and disadvantages. We're looking at the negatives and the positives here as well. And it should also help you to come up with some creative solutions. So, this is taking the starbursting idea and developing it a little bit more. Right, okay, this is from DeBono himself. Once upon a time, a man painted his car white. One half and the other half was black. His friends asked him why he did such a strange thing. He replied, "Because it is such fun whenever I have an accident to hear the witnesses in court contradict each other." So why did he share this story with us? Sometimes there's more than one right answer to a problem or a solution or whatever it is you're looking at. We have different perspectives, different ways of looking at things. So, depending on where you're standing on the road, you will see a white car or a black car, or if you're in the middle of the road, you'll see the half and half. But it is about perspectives, and it's about our own experiences and our own feelings and opinions, and how they may allow us to perceive things differently than someone else. So it just makes you aware of different ways of looking at things. I quite like this cartoon as well. I'm not going to read it out to you, I'll let you read it. But I think it does demonstrate that point as well about perspective. Okay, so what we need to think about a little bit now is how we think. So if you've got different perspectives, then potentially you could have people in conflict. And that's where we talk about adversarial thinking, where you have lots of people working together in theory trying to solve a problem, but because they all have different ideas, different perspectives, different solutions, and each one thinks their solution's the right answer, the best approach, they're going to be pushing for that and not necessarily listening to the other opinions. So adversarial thinking can cause lots of conflict and sometimes means that the problem doesn't get solved because everybody's in conflict. The better option would be to have parallel thinking, where you're looking at the problem, you're exploring all the different options, but you're trying to keep an open mind and everybody's all working together. It means that you can look at all the different opinions. You're not pushing any particular opinion because you're going to try and find out what is the best option, looking at all of the solutions. So we want to focus on parallel thinking rather than adversarial thinking. And as you might imagine from the 6 hats method, or the as the name suggests, there's going to be lots of different ways of thinking, lots of different ways of looking at things. And the 6 hats method means we're going to be looking at all those different ways of solving problems. And the hats let us separate out the different aspects. And the idea is that we apply or we wear each of the 6 hats. So you're not just picking one hat and taking that particular approach. You're using all of the hats and you're swapping the hats as you apply the different types of thinking and the different approaches, the different perspectives. So this is to try and get you to see things from a different perspective. So what are the 6 thinking hats? 6 hats, as you can see here, 6 colours, and each colour indicates a different type of thinking. They are directions. They're telling us what to think. They're giving us questions to ask. They're not descriptions of thinkers, so they're not telling you of a different type of thinker. You have to use each of these hats, as I've said before, and you're asking yourself the questions in each of the different thinking categories. So the white hat focuses on the data available and looks at the facts. What information do we have? What information do we need? And how are we going to get the missing information? So again, you're looking at what do we know currently, what do we need to know, what information do we need, and how do we get that? So nice and straightforward. The red hat is about your emotions. What am I feeling? What does my intuition tell me? And what's my gut reaction? So this is very emotive and it's all about our feelings. So it's recognizing that we do have feelings and we will have reactions to various different things, but it's allowing us to get that recorded and write it down somewhere. As I've said before, our feelings and how we react to things will vary so much depending on lots of different things. How you're feeling, the environment you're in, smells, sounds, how other people are behaving, previous experience with other people, whether or not you're hungry, whether or not you're tired. All of these things have an impact on our emotions, and how you react one day may not be the same as how you would react to the same situation in a different day. So recognizing the emotions that you're actually experiencing at the time is really important. Black hat allows us to look at the negatives. So what are the possible problems? What difficulties could we encounter? What are the points for caution? And what are the risks? So what do we need to look out for and what could go wrong? Yellow hat allows us to do the opposite and look at the positives. What are the benefits of doing this and can it be made to work? Green hat allows us to think about creative ideas. So what new ideas do we have? What are the alternatives? So even just by asking some of these questions, they may start to generate some answers. And how do we overcome the black hat difficulties? So with the black hat, you identified what the problems were, what the possible obstacles might be, what the risks are. So you're then thinking about, how do we deal with these? How can we overcome them? And the blue hat focuses on the process of actually getting the job done, if you like. So where do we start? What's the agenda? What are the objectives? And what should we do next? So the blue hat is really allowing you to make a plan of how you're actually going to make it work once you've identified what you're actually going to do. So this activity should take about 25 minutes. For my class, I want you to come back into class to do this. But my impression, my instinct says that online learning is going to be a feature going forward. But how do we ensure the learning experience is enriched? So I want you to think about this question. I want you to think about this problem of online learning. Students aren't always engaging. So how do we continue with online learning but make it more engaging? How do we get students to engage more with that? Okay, so that's the problem that I want you to explore using the 6 hats approach. Okay, thank you all for listening. There are a couple of extra slides that take us through a mind map of the 6 thinking hats, and then just some tips that when you're doing the activity, I'll put this up on the screen so that you can actually see what you're thinking about. But I'll put the PowerPoint slides up as well so that you can print them off if you want to. And I'll give you the opportunity to ask any questions in class. But if anybody else watching the video wants to ask questions, please feel free to post them on YouTube. Thank you very much for listening.